on Top 3. We are giving you a mystery. Earlier, we had this strange object that our guest, Jim Wallace, will tell us a little bit more about. And he has actually got a very interesting background. He is a homicide detective working cold cases in Southern California, and he's also a pastor. So we're going to have to ask him a little bit about that combination. And he also runs a website called PleaseConvinceMe.com, and you're going to have to convince us a little bit about all this mystery of objects and your whole life. But thank you, Jim, for being with us.
So glad to be here.
Fascinating. No, of course, the question is, how in the world did you go from being a cop to also being a pastor?
Well, I wasn't always a believer. You know, I wasn't a believer until I was 35. So the first 35 years, I was really kind of...
Which was like last year.
Yeah, a couple of years ago. But, I mean, it was really, I was a skeptic, for sure. And for me, I deal with evidence all day long. And so that's the thing that convinced me, finally, was evidence. And that's what we kind of built our church on, this principle. And that's why we have this Please Convince Me, because it's a kind of where we post the evidences that we think give us a strong foundation for our faith.
Wow, that's cool.
So that's kind of where we're coming from.
Yeah. Now, I've heard you have actually gone onto like college campuses and talked to atheists.
And we just came back from Berkeley. We were there all last weekend. We got back on Wednesday, and we spent 5 days just kind of on the campus talking to students about their faith or a lack of faith. And we invited some of the best atheists from the East Bay area to come in and talk to our group. And it really kind of opens our eyes to what the issues are and where people kind of find their meaning in life.
Do those atheists think that they're coming to talk to Christians, or what do they think?
Yeah.
They know it?
So are you trying to like dialogue with them, or?
Yeah, we want to kind of see what their perspective is. I mean, we all share some kind of a worldview. We all hold some kind of worldview, and we want to see what they're grounding their worldview on. Right, and I've been on that position. I've been on that side, so I know what it's like to think that the evidence really points in one direction.
Is it kind of like an intimidating atmosphere?
It can be, but I think what we've discovered is that, I mean, kind of a Matthew 7 principle. I mean, honestly, we don't get a lot of credit for loving those who love us.
That's right.
But we sure get credit when we actually love those who don't love us.
That's good.
So we spend time just loving the people who really not that comfortable with us.
Yeah, because Christianity is the only one that says love people who don't love you.
Absolutely.
It's the only religion that says that.
And this is the hardest thing, I think, about our faith, is that what do you do when someone's really not really happy with you or really doesn't think? These people come to us because they want to convince us to let go of the one evil they see in the world, which is the institution of religion.
Right.
So they want us to let go of this. And so we have to kind of sit in that setting and kind of respond to that.
Wow. So they think you're evil.
Yeah, pretty much. They think that religion is such a source of evil, and certainly it can be, right? We've seen that.
It can be, yeah.
But we're trying to kind of talk and dialogue with them about what it is we believe and why.
And are you actually going to tell us what that thing, that object, the rich was holding?
Yes, this is from my collection of weird objects in my kitchen. I have
see
more.
you used it to cut your hair.
So
yes,
you brought a few more.
This is, you know, it works because I actually use it on my hair.
I knew I was
have
right
this
the whole
device
time.
here.
Oh, yeah, this is
now, see, if you look at these devices, they have almost no purpose. And
This is for a swirl, if you want to...
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like a trowel thing.
No. This is, see, you put this next to a Christmas tree and you put a light right here,
and
it shines different color on the light.
That's actually
Yeah.
I have one of those.
It could be like a cake, a large sheet cake cutter.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
I'm not sure.
interesting.
I have no idea what
Pizza
this
cutter.
is.
What are these things,
I have no idea.
Tell us what
You
they
really don't
are.
know what that is?
I don't even know what this is, but I do know what this is. Because we actually use this all the time.
Okay.
So now that you have your hair all over it, I'm sure it'll be of great use to us. And it is a German noodle maker. Rich was right.
Rich!
How did you get that,
And you
man?
pour
I've
the
been
dough in the
studying
top.
these props and these objects for years.
It's just an intuitive thing with him. Anyone who wears a jacket like this knows what this kind of thing is.
Yeah.
You gotta have the brains.
Bad
to
when
wear
the
a
guest
jacket
is
like
making
that.
fun
You
of
gotta
it as
have
well.
brains or courage, one of those two things.
Brains are courage.
Okay, so anyway, but the point I'm trying to make with all that is that when we go to Berkeley or other places where we talk to atheists, I often will ask them, well, what is the meaning of life for you? Because for me, I used to wonder what the meaning of life was. And I ask them, because it really comes down to a matter of purpose. Why are you here? You know, what is the purpose of your life? And just like this game you played, it's really kind of like an old version of Liars Club, which was a TV show. It's been both in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And in this TV show, the guests would do this. They would kind of tell the contestants what these objects were. All but one were lying. Now, the interesting thing about it, if you really truly want to know what this is, you know, I could ask you, and you might know, but how would you know anyway? You have to ask somebody else, right?
Yeah.
And who would you ask?
You.
Well, not me, but you would ask the person who made this. Because clearly the person who created this knows what he created it for. Now, you could assign meaning to it. You could say, you know, it's a cheese grater. And you could even use it that way. But if this is a widget, clearly the widget does not get to assign its own meaning.
Yeah.
Meaning comes from the creator of the widget. So what we discover when we're talking to atheists, like I used to be, is that typically they would be assigning their own meaning to life. And so they would say, no, I'm a guitarist. I'm whatever gives you happiness and fulfillment.
Right. That's my meaning. Yeah.
That's my meaning in life. But if you want the purest sense of what your purpose is, it seems to make sense to me, philosophically, to go back to whatever it is that created you, whoever it is that created you. That person is going to know what you're here for better than anyone else. Now, all of us live a life sometimes where we're like the cheese grater. You know, we've kind of forced our own meaning into the true meaning of who we are. But I wanted to know, as I became the faith, why am I really here? And that's really the big issue. And I think that so much we're talking about today philosophically is consistent with Scripture. I mean, let me just read from the Scriptures. In Romans 11:36, for from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be the glory forever. Amen. And that's really what we see when we talk about purpose. It seems that this is a great passage because it points in all these different directions. You know, it's from God and through God and to God. It's God from start to finish. And if you think about this, then it seems that the philosophy that we can see from this stupid illustration is consistent. If we reason about the nature of God, if we reason about the nature of purpose, it's consistent with our Christian worldview. That's what I love about our faith, is this is the one faith that you can measure against reality and it matches. You know, it's consistent with what we can think about the nature of purpose, and we find that it's true in the Scriptures as well. So for me, that's an encouragement, and I'm convinced as a result.
Definitely.
Well, what if... I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm sure you get a ton of questions for people. So, I mean, come with things...
bring it.
Yeah, you're like, bring it on.
Yeah,
like, convince me, Jim. You know, what about people say, like, well, you know, I came from my parents, or everything is relative. Just because you say that I have meaning, you know, doesn't mean I think it has meaning. You know, how do you address some of those objections to?
Well, it's true that relativism is a problem, and you kind of see this self-refuting idea. It seems like people are saying that nothing is true, but apparently one thing is true. It's absolutely true that there is no absolute truth. So you see how it's kind of it kind of eats itself, this idea. So once you have to kind of overcome this issue of relativism in general, I mean, look, all of us are going to find meaning. The people who don't believe in God, they also have meaning in their lives. They've just chosen to assign their own meaning. It's like the widget has decided what the widget's going to be. Here's the problem I have as a police officer and as a detective, is that so many times I find that people will find great joy and contentment in doing great evil. And that has become the purpose they have assigned to their lives.
Wow.
And they have become this. Now, what do I say to that? I mean, I want to call them to something bigger, something greater, right? So again, I've got to call them beyond assigning their own meaning. I've got to call them to looking for the meaning that God has given them. You know, the same passage in Romans, just a couple of verses later, talks about how we're not to be conformed to the patterns of this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. And that's exactly what happened to me. That was my own personal experience. You know, that once I realized that God's got a purpose for me, and I started to kind of follow that purpose, a purpose of service, you know, of following Christ, life changes. You all know that. And how do we explain this to a world that's not quite convinced? And so the issue is it even worth convincing? I've had people tell me, why are you trying to convince me? You shouldn't be convincing anybody. You know, in the end, they're trying to convince me not to convince anyone.
Yeah,
so it's the same problem
people
all
get
over
really
again.
mad at the proselytizing thing.
Yeah, so I mean, I learned one thing a long time ago, though. There's no point in giving answers until people have questions. I don't try to answer people who have no questions. So if my life is in some way causing people to question, then I can answer it.
That's really good.
But you don't why even bother until your life is such that it causes people to question.